Welcome, beloved souls, to the sacred container, Royal Rebirth, where we gather to honor the ancient rhythms of the earth and the divinity within ourselves. In this space, we step into the lineage of queens and witches, mothers and daughters, those who walk the path of transformation with courage, reverence, and grace. Tonight, we call in the wisdom of the womb, we call in the sacredness of life, death, and rebirth. And it is my great honor to introduce you to a woman who embodies this sacred journey in every breath that she takes. Gabriella is not only a guest, she's a portal through which the ancient wisdom of the woman the earth speaks. She's a full spectrum doula, a Dianic witch, a pagan ceremonialist, and a free birthing mama. Gabriella is devoted to restoring the matriarchal traditions of our ancestors and healing the womb, healing the earth, and healing us, all through the reclamation of our sacred feminine power. Her work weaves together the threads of witch, mother, sister, offering a space for women to gather in sacred sisterhood and to reconnect with the primal, powerful forces that have been waiting for us to remember. She offers womb wisdom to those on the birth continuum, guiding them with love and care, and with the knowing that every stage of our female experience is sacred, and she creates rites of passage for young girls, marking the sacred threshold from girlhood to womanhood with reverence and clarity. Living in the forest of Oregon with her family, Gabriella holds space for gatherings and ceremonies that are rooted in the earth and in the deep, timeless traditions that honor the feminine, the wild, and the untamed. Please welcome Gabriella. Gabriella, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm doing great. I feel very honored to have this moment of connection. Um,
Likewise. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Well, as you already know, this sacred space is called Royal Rebirth because we're inviting the energy of rebirth and royalty. Royalty, not only as we know it, like, what is kind of like been distorted, like some sort of like someone is superior to all of us,
Hmm.
but royalty as a remembrance of our inherent divinity. And how do we embody it in every cell of our body? How do we step into the throne of our own lives as the rulers of our destiny and reclaim sovereignty and return to the wild and the untamed nature and celebrate life and earth? And so, in that sacredness, I would like to ask you, what has been your own personal journey of transformation, and how have you navigated the process of rebirth? And in that context, what does sovereignty mean to you?
Let's see. I would say that the threshold and the initiation that has really ushered in that sovereignty has been motherhood. Sovereignty, not in the idea of doing it all myself or not asking for help, but sovereignty in more like autonomy and the autonomy to choose how I'm going to mother and choosing how I'm going to walk the path of motherhood, how I'm going to raise my daughter, how I'm going to be in community, how I'm going to infuse this journey with presence and intention, and how I am going to break the cycles of my lineage. And that's an everyday practice, everyday challenge. Truthfully, it's not easy and it's not for the faint of heart. And I honestly struggle. Truthfully, I struggle with motherhood. I've struggled through the journey. It's been a challenging journey for me, physically and emotionally. But I always come back to the power of her birth. When I'm struggling, I remember how strong I had to be to birth her into this world, and to do it alone at home with my partner. I'd say that I'm still kind of gleaning the medicine of that experience to this day. But yeah, essentially, we had her alone at home, and that wasn't the plan. The plan was to have a midwife, but she ended up just kind of bringing a lot of anxiety to the birth, and so we ended up asking her to leave. And about 5 or 7 hours later, Ayla was born. So and she was born perfectly healthy, and it was a really, really beautiful experience, and yeah, I really had to fully claim that initiation and that passage, and it really required that I get really alone. My body really started doing its thing, doing her thing when, the midwife left and my husband took a little nap. That's when my body really started pushing, of course. So yeah, I've experienced rebirth and the alchemy, the mysteries of rebirth through motherhood mostly, and, I help women do the same.
How incredible that sovereignty comes in so many different shades and forms. And it's like the same principle, but we all achieve it through different journeys and initiations, like motherhood. All my respect to that. I'm not a mother myself, and I hold so much reverence and respect for women who are doing it in our current society that is not built to support or even recognize the sacrifices, the hard work of mothers. And so hats off to you for reclaiming that. That's part of our sovereignty and being royal and reclaiming the intelligence of our body, trusting and saying, like, I can do this. Like, I am built to be a queen and a mother and a ruler.
The mother should be the director of the whole experience, not, taking control, because it's actually a huge process of surrendering control to give birth, but she should be the one calling the shots, deciding how and when and where it's happening. And I really got to experience that, and I'm probably the first woman in my lineage in a really long time to birth the way that I did and to bring natural birth back to my lineage. So, it's, it was scary, and birth is a really scary thing. It can be really intense, and I feel like it's so, so important for women to have that confidence in themselves, that empowerment to be able to claim it in the way that she really wants to.
Beautiful. Like you just said, it is the greatest portal of death, like you access. You're risking everything.
Yeah,
And birth, death, birth, rebirth.
yeah.
And it's all orchestrated by our womb, trusting that intelligence built in our womb. And that leads me to my next question. The womb is often seen as the seat of creation, which it is.
Yeah.
How do you believe that women can activate this sacred space within themselves to not only birth life, but also birth their next level of power and purpose in the world?
Healing our cycles is a big one. A lot of women, I myself included, before giving birth, I used to have incredibly painful periods, and now they're painless. I don't know what happened. I trust that, it happened exactly how it was meant, divinely guided to, but I used to have really painful periods, now I don't. And that's been a huge part of just, like, me falling in love with my cycle again in motherhood. It's like it feels like a reward, like a reward for all the hard work I went through. And, yeah, healing our cycles, knowing our cycles, claiming our cycles, living by our cycles. We are cyclical creatures. We are an extension of Mother Nature and her beautiful rhythms and seasons. And our society, like you said earlier, is not set up for mothers, but it's also not set up for the womb at all. It's not really set up for those in the female experience. Um, it's assumed that we are to just continue on with life as if we're not bleeding out, or as if we're not experiencing excruciating pain like so many women do. And there's so many different ways that you can heal and sync up with your cycle and begin to just kind of think more cyclically and live more cyclically. There's so many different resources and ways to do that, but that's really the path is recognizing like, oh yeah, life is moving in a spiral and my body is moving in a spiral. And that's our power. It's not a weakness, it's not a curse that we have this, and we have to really reclaim the blessing and the medicine that is our menstrual cycle, which isn't just bleeding, it also includes our fertility, right? So reclaiming our fertility and not also kind of removing our power from governments and institutions and medical professionals and experts who really don't have this fundamental critical understanding of the female body and the female experience. It's a big one to like kind of break up with that dependence upon male dominated medicine, male dominated industries, and governments that are telling us what to do with our bodies. You know, in these political times here in the US where I live, it's even more imperative that women become sovereign in our bodies and in our reproductive power, in our fertility power, in our female power. That's kind of like the last frontier of colonization. And, you know, if they could, they would just replace us with robots. And that's actually in the works. That is actually something that technology is on its way to doing, is completely replacing women entirely and just gestating babies. They call them bio bags. Anyway, it's a weird time to be female at this time, and yeah, we have to be really radical because the direction that society and our culture is going is so far away from the original blueprint and the original nature of what it means to be human. Another way to really activate our womb power is to give our blood back to the earth. There's a ancient indigenous Hopi prophecy that says something like, when women give their blood back to the earth, the men will come home from war. And I don't know, you know, the exact origins of that quote, but a lot of people refer to that as a sign of hope and a sign of inspiration to return to a way of life that connects the womb of women back to the womb of the earth. And this is a ritual that women have done throughout time. And if you think about, you know, the reality is that we peed outside for the majority of our existence on this planet. Indoor plumbing is a recent invention. This idea that like your waste isn't going into the earth is a really modern thing. So for the majority of our time here, our urine, our waste, and our sacred blood was going to the earth regularly and frequently. And it's not only a way of sanctifying our cycles and our wombs, but it's also a way of feeding the land and feeding the earth, because our menstrual blood contains all the ingredients necessary to create life. So it's actually a really wonderful fertilizer, and I give it to my garden, I give it to my plants, and a lot of women are kind of reclaiming that ritual in these times, and it's really beautiful to see. And a lot of women are just kind of becoming much more womb literate, having the literacy about our cycles, about what it means to be women, and I think that really, like, it's about undermining the negative stigmas and stereotypes that were given to us by our culture that really doesn't actually love women, and finding that love again. And it was through women's circles that I really began to fall in love with my body and with my cycle again. And that's another pathway of just kind of reclaiming sovereignty, is meeting and connecting with other women who are doing the same.
I love that you're mentioning this love for your cycle, for your blood, for your body, because that's such an important piece of being sovereign. Like there's no way that you can be sovereign and rule and be a queen if you don't love your body and if you don't understand how it works and if you don't, that's part of
Yeah.
our power.
Yeah,
And that
that's
connects
a great quote right there. I'm gonna quote that. You
and
can't
that connects.
yeah, you can't be sovereign if you don't love your body. Straight up.
Mhm. And it's our in my opinion or in my experience, it has been my direct connection with the earth.
Yeah.
How do I understand Mother Earth? By understanding my own body. And how do I connect with it? Like you're saying, I bring my offering, but I also can tell, like, oh, this isn't really serving my body. This will not serve the earth. And, you know, like we start healing ourselves and we start healing the planet. It's a mutual
Yeah.
collaboration and
Yeah.
connection.
And our sovereignty can only come from that relationship. It comes from relationship, actually. It's not this hyper independent, individualistic paradigm of patriarchy. It's actually very collaborative and very communal. This idea and the fact that we are pack animals. We never evolved to do life on our own, to live life on our own. So connecting, making connections with community and creating magic together is an incredible path of reclaiming sovereignty. I wouldn't be where I am at all if it weren't for the guidance and inspiration of the women around me.
And that's also, I believe, part of what our ancestors did. Like there was never a individual that was doing it all by herself or himself. So it's part of that ancestral wisdom that we're also bringing back and connecting us to our roots, that we work with each other, that we work together. My next question for you, Gabriella: if rebirth, or when it is often tied to healing ancestral wounds and reconnecting with our lineage, what, in your opinion, do you think is the significance of ancestral remembrance and stepping into our full power? And how do we carry those codes of royalty forward to heal ourselves and the collective?
Healing the womb is also healing our lineage. Considering that the womb is the seat of life, it's also the seat of the ancestors. So the ancestors come in through the womb, they're rebirthed, recycled, and then they're born again. A lot of lineage traditions hold that to be true. So when we heal for ourselves, we're not just, doing it for this body, we're healing the memories that live in our tissues, the memories that live in the waters and in the blood and in the DNA that flows through us. And it's a beautiful, somatic, but also mystical experience. And, it comes about in many different forms. There's all different kinds of ways to facilitate this, like ancestral healing. And it can be somatic, it can be spiritual, it can be mystical, it can come in all these different forms. But the power of reclaiming our life is felt through the generations. The power of reclaiming our voice, our truth, and standing in it and living by it is incredibly powerful, considering the fact that so many of our ancestors had to stay silent and they had to abandon their truth and they had to abandon their bodies. They had to disconnect from their pleasure in order to just survive the circumstances that they were in, which they didn't choose necessarily, perhaps. But we now have the choice to decide how we want to live. Those of us who are privileged with choice, I should say, but I think everyone has some amount of choice, right? In how we relate with ourselves, how we relate with the earth. That's a very personal experience. And what's really beautiful about the goddess traditions, about the earth traditions, earth religions, is that when we begin to remember the cycles of the earth, we are awakening those memories of the ancient ancestors within our bodies, within our soma, that also did that. So, 7 generations ago, I believe we had ancestors who were deeply tied to the land, deeply connected to the seasons and cycles, and deeply connected to community as well. And so when we begin to do that same thing, when we connect with each other, when we sing these songs, when we remember the dances, when we remember the rituals, when we remember our power and we speak our truth, we are hearkening back to a time when people were more rooted, when people were more connected to nature and to each other. And there's a lot of power in realizing that we're not alone in this remembrance, that we are doing it alongside so many. And I also like to think of all of us alive today as representatives of our lineage, representatives of our respective clans, nations, tribes, all here at this time for a really important reason. And yeah, there's a lot of power in just real in remembering the ancient ways, but reinventing them so that they're relevant for these times.
We're also building the future together. So, right now, these actions that we're taking right now, whatever makes us feel inspired and move our soul into action, is building, shaping the future. And sometimes we have to be more mindful of that. Like, do we want to repeat the same things that we have experienced so far? Is that the life that we want our daughters to have?
Right.
Or do we want to imagine and reclaim a new future?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that process of shedding the old and rebirthing the new is a very feminine process, right? It's a very, very feminine. It's nothing new, right? We've done this for thousands of years and the earth is constantly doing this. And so it's just kind of like the turn and the tide of life. And I'm finding more and more through all the seasons that it's easier to go with that flow rather than resist that flow and to live by the seasons. So right now we're in winter, but we're slowly, since the winter solstice, more and more light is coming, more and more capacity, more and more resource, more and more light is here to awaken and activate and fertilize the seeds of our dreams. It's not really the time to bloom, to blossom or to bear fruit. That's going to come later. Right now, it's a really beautiful time just to bless those seeds and till the soil of our lives and of our soul garden and feed that soil and feed those foundations so that those seeds can even grow.
I love that you said we have to let go. We have to shed that old. That's so natural. And there was a point in we learned not to let go, and that's not natural. And that's why we're stuck in cycles of abuse and things that no longer serve. We are not letting the natural work its way through and just rebirth whatever we need so that we can blossom, like you just said. In that same context, there was a time, and I love that you said that too, but there was a time when the people on the land and our ancestors were so deeply connected to the earth and the cycles and everything that is in nature. But then the concept of colonization and, dominion over empire took over, and we have been exploiting our beautiful planet, and we have been disconnected from our mother. So the term of royalty, sometimes it might ignite this kind of like resistance or this, oh, I don't want to be royal because I don't want to step into more of that. The empire ideal, the I
Yep.
am superior, I dominate. So this event is not inviting people to step into that kind of idea,
Yeah.
um, but more into building a new construct that the divine and our divine birthright is a royalty. And in that concept, we are deeply connected to the earth. We're responsible. We hold stewardship over our gifts and the land and the animals. How can women embody this energy to lead from a place of reverence and authenticity, in your opinion?
Well, first of all, I want to go back to something you said that we've become so disconnected from nature. I sort of disagree. I think like mentally we have, but physically we can never actually disconnect, right? We can never actually forget or disconnect from the land because we need her. We'll always need her. We come from nature and we're going to return back to nature. And in between, we eat of her fruits. We walk upon her earth and her soils. We're constantly dancing through the seasons of life. The weather patterns, the climate, all of it affects us. All of it is felt in our bodies. Our bodies respond to the phases of the moon, the availability of light, so mentally maybe our egos are disconnected from nature, but we can never actually do that. And so it's actually just about remembering that we are nature. And when we remember we are nature, when we remember that the earth loves us, it inspires us to protect her. And when we step into that role of protector of nature, I find a great sense of power in not not do anything but to serve. And that's the paradox of royalty or being a queen or being a priestess or any of these leadership roles, is that your leadership is ultimately always to give back and to be of service to the things that feed you, to remember that your power is not just for you to hoard, it's for you to share, and it's to be offered back towards the things that feed us, sustain us, and empower us. So, yes, we can all be leaders and we can all have our power and our expertise in the fields in which we feel very drawn to. But I don't personally feel that it's, you know, empirical or hierarchical. I don't know how to say that word. But it's not hierarchy to embody a leadership role. It's actually just like the truest, most authentic version of participation and like taking responsibility. And that's the paradox of power, right? The amount of power you have is proportional to the amount of responsibility that you also must have. I myself am very much still learning that in motherhood every single day. But it's always, and when everything is centered around nature, it's much more easy to create systems and structures that feed back, that are circular rather than like this, right? And there isn't this like ladder. There's no ladder. It's actually just a big circle. It's a big spiral. And your power is because of the power of those before you, and it's for the power of those to come, right? Power is something to be shared. It's not something to be hoarded and to be cloistered or siphoned or harvested from others if you're doing it with righteous intent, if you're doing it from the heart and from the womb and from the earth. And that's why we really need to revive the matriarchal traditions of our ancestors and of living cultures today. There are living matriarchies alive today that exist, very circular. They have a very egalitarian system where nature is at the center rather than men, rather than male power. And when nature's at the center and when children are at the center, we all thrive. So we have to kind of break up with the hierarchies of the old and create a whole new way of relating and organizing with each other so that power can be equally shared and equally distributed and ultimately feed the things that feed us.
In my own experience of transforming and letting go the old, people like you and your content and leading us to the great mother and the feminine archetypes and the matriarchal systems, like these ideas are so helpful, or they have been helpful to me, because not only I remember that leadership is how I lead my life and how I make choices, how am I consciously leading myself and walking into a world that not always takes me in the best with the best. Yeah, it's not always like the best, but it's
Mhm.
all inside of me, right? And like you said, the mother and Mother Earth and the planet, everything creates space for me to be safe and to be myself and to show up authentically. And those are the codes. I belong. I reclaim my space. I reclaim my voice. I reclaim my leadership. And that's when I rebirth myself and I embody this essence of royalty and divinity. And many people might see that and be like, wow, that's exactly what I need to. I need to ignite that light again. So I really want to thank you for not only this moment of love and like you're sharing the codes of how do we heal ourselves, but I want to thank you for all the work that you're doing, because you're inspiring women and setting that path for women to see, wow, there's another way. And it's so beautiful and it's so fulfilling in the body. It feels good. And I believe that that is what we need to aim to follow now. Not the paths that drains us, but the paths that makes us feel an overflow, because that's sustainable. Everything else will not last, but only our connection with each other and seeing this path where we lead ourselves into freedom and royalty in that sense. Thank you so much, Gabriella. Is there anything that you would like to close this conversation with? Anything else that you would like to share?
I really love to remind us all to hold on to the things that remain, that endure, and that truly are sustainable beyond the rise and fall of empires. What remains when empires fall? Community, the earth, family, sustenance. everything that truly matters. Those are the things that empire is seeking to try to disconnect from and disassociate from, but also seeking to harvest and siphon and completely absorb into its, mechanical grip. So I invite us all to just remember, like, the goddess reminds us that nothing ever just ends. Everything is constantly changing, everything is constantly rebirthing and taking new forms and taking new shapes. And it's up to us. Goddess doesn't want to be worshiped, she wants to be embodied. She wants to be awakened, and she lives within us and she lives within the earth. And we're not doing this alone. And we need to refer back to ancient wisdom to reinvent and create future pathways that will actually feed and sustain all of us, not just a few of us. And when we reclaim our authenticity, our magic, our power, when we break these chains and we break the cycles and we break free, we are more able to participate in this great change and in this rebirth from a place of power rather than a place of burnout. And I'm right there with all of you. Like I said, I struggle. I'm not perfect at this at all. I come from a lineage of a lot of disconnection. And so it's fallen on my shoulders to really be intentional and really decide how I want to live. And we're not alone.
Mm. It is a big task, and you're a powerful warrior. Thank you for being you. How amazing.
Thank you for having
As
me.
we prepare, thank you. As we prepare to close this sacred conversation, I invite you all to carry these reflections with you. What within you is ready to die so that something more true and royal and divine can be reborn? And where in your life you're being called to rise, not from force, but from your own birthright of divinity. Gabriella, thank you one more time for being a living embodiment of this remembrance, for guiding us through with grace, depth, and fierce devotion. And to everyone else here, may you leave this space with your heart a little fuller, your spirit a little freer, and your crown sitting a little higher. Until next time, thank you.